This is the Lincoln Journal-Star editorial board, and we are talking with City Council member Sandra Washington, who is running for re-election to her at-large seat on the City Council. And before we start, Sandra, we'll just run through who's on the call, so you know who might be asking you some questions. First off, I'm Dave, and I am the editor here at the paper.
Good morning, Dave.
Morning, Kent. You want to go?
Hi, Sandra. Kent Walgamot. I do the entertainment stuff.
I read
we've
you.
Talked before.
Yes, we've talked and I read you. So thank you.
Martha?
Martha Florence, you know me, and I'm one of the community members on the board.
Great. Nice to see you this morning.
I'm Robbie Estes. I'm the controller here at the Journal-Star.
Oh, controller or comptroller?
Controller.
Okay.
I've always wondered about that too. It just seems like two letters, but you make a big deal about getting the name right. So,
good morning, Robbie.
And I'm John Schreier. I'm one of the assistant editors, assistant city editors, and I'm on the editorial board as well.
Okay. Good morning, John.
Good morning.
all right. Well, we will keep this to 30 minutes, Sandra. And I have a series of questions, and other editorial board members may chime in with some follow-up questions as we run through here. First off, you have been on the City Council now. You know what is involved in it. We have watched the City Council have a busy and eventful year. Why do you want to do it again? And what have you learned? What's prepared you to serve again?
Well, I want to do it again because I think there's some really wonderful things happening in Lincoln, and I think there's more work to be done to make our good city even better. I'm committed to public service. You know from my resume that I worked for a federal agency for 25 years, and I took that job very seriously. And I don't think it's much of there was no question in my mind when I looked at that agency and services in its title. And I really did feel like to work for that agency was a service to the public. And the only other jobs that I've held in my life have been service jobs, whether I was working for the state, whether I was working for Girl Scouts. I felt like every job was a job of service. And it's what I'm familiar with and what motivates me to get up in the morning, because I like being part of a team working to make the world better. Why I'm running for City Council specifically is because I think that City Council and local governments need to remain transparent and accessible to everyone. And I think there's a lot of confusion about how city governments work. This last year has certainly told me that and shown me that even though people had lots to say, oftentimes they were a little confused about what the process was to be heard. And I want to make certain that people understand that they are being heard, and this is how you do it. Well, not one, but many of the protesters who came in, whether or not they were Black Lives Matters protesters or they were Back the Blue, came into City Council asking us to take care of issues dealing with the schools. And it was, no, you can go to the school board, we'll listen to you, but we're not in charge of schools. Or they would say something else and we'd say, well, that would be the county. And they'd say, well, where did they meet and who are they? And so just walking people through how civic government works and that there's multiple jurisdictions here is something I'd like to help people understand. And then besides that, I have planning in my background and my training, and it is an amazing and wonderful puzzle, cities, and how we build good cities is how we build good neighborhoods. And I like the puzzle pieces of putting together infrastructure and social programs and policies for safety all together to create something that works well.
Well, thank you for that. I'm going to go a little bit out of order because you brought up a topic that I would have asked about a little later, and that's transparency. And then you also mentioned accessibility. Are there things that you have noticed that have changed over the 4 years, or things that you have tried to accomplish regarding transparency and accessibility over the last 4 years? And given, you know, the types of discussions and debates that happened in the last year, what are next steps, or do you think next steps are warranted to help get people involved in government?
Okay. Those are good questions. All right. I'll start with accessibility. And here is a conversation that we've been having in city council meetings, primarily in the open public comment sessions that happen twice a month. And I'm sure that my response will upset some folks who have come in and demanded things from city council that we've not done. When we initially passed the emergency declaration and we started in this journey that we were unsure of, there were lots of ways for us to have moved forward. And one of the things that I absolutely was committed to was that we would continue to meet in city council, whether or not we were doing that by Zoom or we were doing that in person, that we would not stop the functioning of our government here. And when, you know, we looked up the road here and saw that Omaha City Council had stopped meeting for a while. And we said, no, we should continue to meet. The city still has business that must be done. And we met by Zoom for a while, and then we came back in. And we, at some point, had our chambers really closed down. But I said, we should do something else. We should find a way for the public to stay involved. And I would still like to continue to find ways for the public to stay involved. Even, heaven forbid, we should have to close chambers because our numbers are spiking or whatever, or the next pandemic or whatever. I would like to make certain that we have electronic access into city council meetings, whether it's not just the viewing thing. It's got to be a two-way access. And every time that we have opened up our chambers to folks who want to Zoom in to testify on a specific issue or Zoom in on open public comment, I felt like that we had made our chambers as accessible as we possibly could. Now we're at the moment where we need to open up more seats in chambers. As we go down the dial, as we plateau at yellow, and hopefully we're still going down the dial, I think we need to open more seats. I also believe that we should open those seats only when we are in agreement with the county board. Multiple groups use the same space, and conversations with the county board are happening behind the scenes to make certain that we together can open up chambers in the same numbers, so that it's not a guessing game for the public, that if they come into city council, there'll be so many seats, but if they go into the county, there'll be fewer seats. And so we're trying to move forward consistently with each other. And I hope in the next week or two that we will have many more seats available. So that's the accessibility piece. The transparency piece, this is gonna be a little bit of nuts and bolts. I've noticed when we're looking at the plans that come out from either the planning department or urban development, that we put the document out for public review, the public comments on it, and then the document changes, but then we don't explain how it changed or what happened to people's public comments. When I realized that that was what was happening, I started with the affordable housing plan, and same on the climate, and then I moved over to the climate action plan. But the affordable housing plan, I said, you know, we had a lot of public comments, and I said, you came back and you told me that this is the new document, that we've gone from draft to final. And I said, but I don't exactly see what's happened. Can you please point out to me what's happened? I said, and now let's show the public what happened. It's not fair to ask them to comment and then not let them know what happened with their comments. And that's not a piece of the process that the city has ever done. They may say in a paragraph, oh, you know, thank you so much for your comments. We've made some changes. And I said, but as a person who ran a federal environmental compliance program, we had to take every single comment, log it in, and show what happened to the comment. And we had to say whether or not it was a valid comment on point, and we made this change, or we didn't make the change because of this reason. Now, I'm not suggesting that we have to increase the process so much so that a planning process takes, you know, 6 months longer, but I think we owe it to the public to tell them what we've done. And I noticed that that was really helpful on the housing plan. And then when the realtors and home builders came back and said, you didn't take into consideration our comments, we could come back and say, no, we did. And this is where we made those changes. And if you don't think those are enough, let's have another conversation about that. But we could document, not just say, oh, but we read them. It's like, no, we have to be able to have a real conversation with the public about what they say, what we hear, and what happens to our decision making. So I think that is one of the best things I've done around transparency, and I hope to do more of that in the future. And I'll be talking to planning and urban development again about how we might be able to systemize that so it's not a new thing every time we do it.
Okay, so here's a big one. What do you think are the most important issues on the horizon for this next city council to deal with?
Wow, there's a lot of things that are pressing. I think affordable housing continues to be a big issue. And as other folks have said very clearly, the affordability of housing. And I split them into two sections specifically. When I talk about affordable housing, I'm talking about housing that is for low income folks needing affordable housing. So that's somewhere between the 60% AMI to about 100, maybe 120 AMI. And then their affordability is that everybody wants a house that they can afford, regardless of the price point. And I hear realtors talk about that. I certainly know folks who are going out looking for homes and say that their house, what they want is a house they can afford $300,000, and so they're not finding a lot of houses at that point, that price point. And partly it's because we don't have a lot of housing stock. I'm trying to understand and work through all the issues the developers are providing about how lots are too expensive and what we need to do in order to change that. It's a complicated issue. And a lot of it has to do with market pricing. And I don't think the city should probably get involved in determining lot prices. So I'm not going to tell people what they should or should not sell their land for. That's a private property issue that they're allowed to manage as they do. But if there's anything that the city can do in zoning that might help that, I certainly am interested in having those kinds of conversations. Besides that, I think the flooding and how we manage floodplains, I think we've done a decent job, but the Salt Creek study that's come out has shown a couple of things that I think need to be addressed. And so I want to talk a little bit about that and how do we do that and still have some kind of justice, because a lot of the folks who live in those areas are folks who are low income or disadvantaged in some way. And I don't want to make any solution so onerous on them. So I'd like to really find solutions that work, that are not simply structural solutions for managing floodplain, but are also non-structural. And then I think how we prepare ourselves to become a more resilient community is critically important, and resilient in lots of different ways. So we'll talk about climate change and the climate action plan. I think there are so many small activities that we can initiate that will have a very positive benefit. And there are some big things. I mean, when I really stop to think about it and try not to I'm holding my breath and I can't even exhale, I think about our next freshwater source. Lincoln desperately needs to have another freshwater source, and it's an expensive project and it's overwhelming for some folks to think about, but it does have to happen. And I've had people tell me, well, we've got plenty of water. And I'm like, well, okay, I will hear you tell me that we have plenty of water, but I know for a fact that as climate changes and as Lincoln grows, our reliance only on the Platte River is too much. That's not going to be a water source that's able to sustain this community 50 years from now. And so I'd like to make certain that we've got a second place to get fresh water, and we've got options, and we have some time.
All right, you said the magic word, water. Kent, do you have any follow-up questions? He loves water.
I know, I saw him get very excited. He started to move around. So.
Kent, did you have anything? You're muted right now.
Yeah, I couldn't find, I was so excited I couldn't find the mute button. two things sort of related to both of them. Do you think that the levee or the Salt Creek flooding project should be sort of incorporated into the climate plan as well? I think that, you know, that's interrelated, and that is such a huge undertaking to build a new water supply system. We have time, but you kind of got to get started now. Is there one of the ideas that you sort of think we should head that direction first, whether teaming up with Omaha or pumping it from the Missouri, or anything else?
I am curious about the options of working with Omaha. Right now, they seem to have more than they need, and they're certainly interested in initiating conversations. It looks like it's a less expensive option, but you know, when we talk about teaming up with Omaha for a more regional water supply system, I do wonder about prioritization and who gets to be first in line and who's second in line. So I think those are things that need to be negotiated. And in the West, water is precious, and we haven't had to have really tough conversations about water in eastern Nebraska. And I think that over the next decades, those tough conversations are going to be had. And so if we're working with Omaha, I just want to make certain that that we work something out that's not strictly a priori, and that they understand that we have needs as well. And, you know, we're not going to be the last in line.
And do you think the climate action plan would be a place to, you know, kind of incorporate the Salt Valley?
I do. There's so many things that are interconnected with the Salt Valley and climate change. I mean, I think when I dream big away from, you know, just making certain bills get paid in the city and things, I think about the Salt Valley project. I think about conservation. I think about not getting into arguments with the Fish and Wildlife Service over the salt beetle any longer. And so I think about all the wetlands that are at the base of the Salt Valley, and think, okay, there's got to be a way to protect wetlands, protect those endangered species, provide more open space, conservation, recreation space for humans, give the floodwaters place to dissipate, and perhaps create some carbon sinks. Yes, let's do it all. And in the meantime, if we've done all of that well, how do we increase space for affordable housing? How do we also create, or how do we help rehabilitate old housing stock here to make it healthier? And how do we help increase the life expectancy of folks who live in central and northeast Lincoln? So all of those, and you know, floodwaters, molds and mildews, low quality housing, all of those things for me interplay. So yeah.
All right, thanks. Oh, Kip muted himself again, so I think he's satisfied.
Okay.
Or I could take up the rest of the hour.
I was afraid you'd do that, so I was kind of trying to.
We can go out for coffee later.
A glass of fresh water.
A glass of fresh water.
So obviously, COVID has had a huge impact on our society in the last year. How is dealing with it from your perspective, or has dealing with it from your perspective changed the way you view city government, public service, public health, any of those issues?
Well, certainly it's made it harder, you know, and what makes it hard is that the amount of anxiety and tension that has grown because of our public health response. Of course, for me, the first thing is public health, public safety, saving lives, and we've done that. But the anxiety that has grown, and maybe it's always been there, but it's more present. And I think it's a mix between feeling like asking our businesses to shut down, asking all of us to quarantine at the very beginning was the right decision. So we did pull in, but then as we opened back up again, people had, I think, underlying anxiety and tension. Throw that into the political mix of what was happening, in the last couple of years, and then add the social unrest. And I think the anxiety of feeling contained and feeling the economic pressures has just created an incredibly tense and angry situation. And I think that's at the end of the day, when we get past people's physical health, that's what's going to remain for me as the lasting impression of dealing with the COVID crisis is the folks who feel disenfranchised by efforts to protect public health. It sometimes leaves me at a loss, but I feel like what we need in the next bit of time, however it takes, is ways to increase civility again, bring down the temperature, have a conversation, because this isn't just about whether or not someone doesn't believe in masks or thinks that masks are ineffective or have a more conservative political viewpoint. I sincerely believe that their sense of freedom has been curtailed. And if it's possible to have a conversation that is rational, I would like to have that conversation because I want to find out why they feel the way they feel and what they honestly believe is their responsibility to address and what they think needs to be addressed by others. And I would say the same thing for anyone else who's feeling that kind of anxiety, whatever their political spectrum. There's some that is ours to take care of for ourselves, and there are some that we need to share. We need to be compassionate and be empathetic to them. And so I'd like to figure out how we regain what I thought we had in Lincoln, which was a real sense of shared existence and community. And I feel like it's there in large number, but there are fissures that I had not seen before.
Well, I appreciate that answer a lot. We certainly have front row seats to daily incivility, and it's disheartening. And that was going to be my next question. So you anticipated that. I appreciate that. I have one final question, but first I wanted to open it up to any of the board members who had something besides Kent and water. Kent, you can have a non-water question if you want, but.
Yeah, I do have one, particularly after the shooting in Minnesota a couple days ago. What is the impact? What do you think of the social unrest of Black Lives Matter? How can the city address that in a fashion that isn't extreme, I guess would be a way to put it?
I don't think anything that the city has done so far has been extreme in addressing the real issues that are brought up by Black Lives Matter protesters. There are a number of things to look at here. One, those injustices are true, they're real, and they have impacts on people. The other thing is that we're not going to change people's hearts and minds. Not everybody's hearts and minds can be changed. And so now we have to look at what can be changed. And I think part of what can be changed and what the city should commit themselves to is really looking at how are our policies, the city policies and programs and services, how are they created? What are how are they delivered? Who benefits? Who doesn't benefit? when we create a system where, or when we create a situation, not even a situation, pardon me, let me think about it. So recently, we made the decision to cut back StarTran bus services from a 30-minute repeat to a 60-minute repeat on a couple of routes. What we need to always ask ourselves is, who's using the routes? Who is most affected when we lengthen the service time on those buses? And, where do they work? Where are they trying to go? And are there other options for those riders? And then for how long? And then are we going to do that? And then how do we communicate that decision? All of those things, those are really simple questions, but those are questions that we should be asking each time we make a policy decision, because those have real impacts on specific groups of people. And we should be willing to assess that through a racial and socioeconomic lens. And so I would very much like to implement those kinds of decision-making tools in all of city decisions, so that everybody is aware. And those are things that private businesses could do as well. And I think that's what the city can do.
Are there
I saw
any-
John's hand up earlier as well.
I've got one question, Sandra. And you've talked a lot about affordable housing, and I know that's been a priority of the mayor's administration. But some of the projects, in particular the Wayuka area project, there has been some pushback from neighbors.
Yeah.
And when it comes to creating affordable housing in Lincoln, the most economic place to do that is in the established areas through infill housing. How do you balance the concerns of neighbors about additional people in their neighborhood with the need to address the housing shortage, particularly on the more affordable end of the spectrum?
It's a really good question. And those are very difficult decisions. Part of it is the model it takes for building large numbers of affordable houses. So I think there's 3 or 4 things that we should be doing. We should look to rehab the existing stock, because we can't build our way into affordable housing in the next 10 years if we're not trying to also hold on to the affordable housing stock that we have. Everyone is challenged by having changes come to their neighborhood, and a lot of times, and it's risky only in so much that it takes a fair amount of time for folks to, like on the Wayuka project, that neighborhood was zoned R4, but it was living as if it was almost in that section of the neighborhood R1. People had very large lots. And the time for them to argue about the density, the future density, really was when it got zoned initially, R6, I'm sorry. And so when we go to what's allowable, R6 is allowable. What that would provide was exactly what happened. And now it's really about how can we design it so that it does not create an eyesore within that community. And I think that this project is a pretty good project to do that. But now it's a wait and see. And so that's the hard part for the neighbors, is they have to wait and see. And it's, I'm working on trust here. I'm trusting that the developer is going to follow through with what he says, that we're going to get the screening, we're going to get the landscaping to bring it down in scale. And then there's a recognition that the people who are coming in low-income housing are no different than the people who live in that community. It's just a matter of how much means they have. They're still good people. They still need a place to live. Oftentimes, I think we need to be looking at how we can do affordable housing in areas all over Lincoln. As long as it's near public transit, we should be thinking about how can we put affordable housing really anywhere. And there's another project that's on the horizon, not so far, that is going to be affordable and workforce housing. And it's going to be new, and it's going to be on the edge of Lincoln. But as within very close proximity. So I think that we just need to sort of walk through these things with the neighborhoods in existing neighborhoods and get their buy-in. There were some things that we got buy-in in, and the project was significantly different when it got approved than when it was first discussed. So the neighbors didn't get everything they wanted. They certainly wanted difference, but they got some of what they wanted. And the project did come down in scale and the number of units, just not as far as they wanted it to. But
Right.
that's a gap financing issue, and we'll hopefully the new housing consortium will be able to provide gap funding so that we can build smaller scale and not be in that 100 unit-ish place.
Sandra, the last question I have for you is an easy one. What didn't we ask that you would want, that you'd want to make sure that we knew about you, your candidacy, time on city council, anything?
Anything. You know, right now, public safety, actually, I think that there's a misconception that as a Democrat, that I am not pro-safety and that I am not pro-police. And I had a very long conversation with the police union. It went a lot longer than I think any of us thought. It started out as a 30-minute conversation. It lasted 2 hours. I was very honest with them about the fact that I'd worked with law enforcement most of my career in the Park Service, both as a supervisor and as an incident team leader often. And I respect the police. I believe that the Lincoln Police Department is doing a very good job. And I think there are places that need some improvements. And I think that we agree on the places where they need to do a little bit better. But it's not a broken agency. But I think that they're feeling downtrodden. I think they're feeling abused in some way. And I think that they need some support too, because I don't want a police force out there who feels like they're not appreciated and doesn't want to come to work. That doesn't help our community if the officers are feeling like they'd rather be someplace else. So I would like to help address that. And I'd like them to figure out, you know, we need a new police chief and we need our recruitments. We need recruiting to go up, and we need to be recruiting folks who want to be police officers in Lincoln, Nebraska. I think we're a great community, and we can get there.
All right. Well, that's an upbeat ending note, I guess. So Sandra, thank you very much for your time today. We really appreciate it. Once we've talked to all the candidates, we will be posting this video online, and we appreciate your service on the city council. We appreciate everybody who runs for office or runs for re-election, because it's a big commitment, and we wish you the best.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Thanks a bunch.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra.
Bye.